Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Careers and Policy session. My name is Andrew Martell. I'm just going to be hosting and moderating today with our guest, Laura Packard. Laura, if you could give a brief introduction for us.
Sure. And also, we may have more people join us in mid session, but for right now, it's me. My name is Laura Packard, and I have been working in and around democratic politics and progressive politics for over a decade now, jumping from campaigns to organizations and back again. And I've been consulting for the past decade. So lately, I have been working in health policy, and how I came to that was a kind of a roundabout route because over 10 years ago now, the AFL-CIO sent me to Arkansas to help get the Affordable Care Act passed in the first place. So I was working on the ground trying to establish policy as a field communications person. And little did I know that many years later, I was going to be diagnosed with cancer, and the Affordable Care Act would save my life. So that happened in 2017. And the day after my first chemotherapy, Republicans in the US House voted to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. So I got back into the health policy arena, advocating to save the ACA in 2017. And 2018 was more of the same and doing accountability work for the elected officials that voted to threaten our healthcare. And then finally, this year is the first chance that I've really had to work on pro healthcare uh, laws. This year, I worked in Nevada and Colorado to help establish a state based public option for healthcare. So I have done advocacy work on the national level and on the state level, and accountability work when the advocacy doesn't go as planned. Uh, but I have really run the gamut, and you'll see a lot. Some people in the policy world have fancy degrees and years of experience, and they come from think tanky worlds. But you'll also see a lot of practical people doing policy that come to it because it's a passion, it's an interest of theirs, and then they find a way to make a career out of it. Or sometimes people will get their first job as the policy person for a small campaign, may hire somebody without much experience to handle their policy stuff. And then larger shops, of course, will look for people with more experience as they advocate for more.
Awesome. Something that you mentioned that early on you started with political campaigns, which I'm sure a lot of viewers that are watching us right now can relate to, and also that you, for a while or at least a couple times, switched between campaigns and organizations. How did you handle that kind of switch in, I guess, lifestyle for one thing, but also kind of the topics that you would be dealing with?
Well, I think it's really common to go back and forth because campaigns tend to only be in even years that you will have a campaign job, and maybe not even right away. So if you are not a fan of fun employment, then you need something that's a steadier gig. So you'll see a lot of people jump onto orgs in off years and then jump onto campaigns in on years and so on. And I think that it's good to develop policy expertise in whatever area you're passionate about. Regardless, I think it makes you a stronger campaign staffer if you understand some of the policy pieces, as well as I think it makes you a better policy person if you understand campaigns, because there are plenty of people that advocate for legislation that have no idea how to actually get it passed, and that starts with electing the right people. So I think it makes you stronger if you have a varied background and you've done some of all of the above. And how you can really kind of get your start if you're just starting out is start by doing. You can volunteer for local organizations in policy. You can volunteer with campaigns. You can try to be their first, maybe their first and only policy hire, and get to know people, because to effectively move policy, you need to have a lot of friends. You need to know what the power structures are on the ground to get something passed or to defeat it. And you need to know the right people to call when you need allies.
Okay. Kind of along that vein, I mean, with political campaigns, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's fairly straightforward in how you network. You go to events, you see people. There's all kinds of fundraisers that you're with your candidate, and you meet new people, new candidates, etc. Kind of in the more, I guess, organization or strictly policy sense, how do you build up that rapport with people and those connections to kind of move along with your career?
Well, I guess it sort of depends on whether your goal is to be in Washington, D.C., or in your state capital, or whether you are happy where you're planted. Do you want to move around for your career, or do you want to dig in and buy a house somewhere? So that'll sort of affect the types of relationships you build if you are D.C. focused, or if you're your state capital focused, or if you're more locally focused. Here in Colorado, Denver is the capital, the biggest city is the capital. And so you can establish yourself in the Front Range, and it's good for state legislative purposes and for moving things statewide in Colorado too. But in some places like Michigan, the largest city in Michigan is Detroit. The Metro Detroit suburbs is where a lot of union power, organizational power is. But Lansing, which is an hour and a half, 2 hours away, depending on traffic, is the state capital. And Michigan has a year-round legislature, so there is a whole state legislative culture in Michigan that is different from and separate from the Metro Detroit political culture. And so you kind of have to pick where you want to be, who you want your besties to be, and focus in on that. And again, if you want to go to DC, you should be volunteering for a local congressional candidate and so on, people that are going to DC that will then want to hire up.
Right. So I guess kind of to maybe summarize a little bit, you approach that kind of networking in more of a, I guess, a vertical sense where you pick a certain area that you want to be, and then you follow that path, almost
Mhm.
exclusively. Because I know networking today with social media is a lot of just everybody all at once, but you're recommending that people kind of stick to where they're planning on going and really focus on that.
Absolutely. Although plenty of campaign people jump around. So somebody that could be a friend at, the comms director of a congressional campaign could wind up in a different state, could wind up in Washington, D.C. So for campaign people, expect them to move on. But a lot of policy people and executive directors and nonprofits or whatever, they stay put and for years to come.
Okay. And for everybody watching, we actually have another guest coming in. Let me bring him in here. Hello, you are live. Welcome to the Careers and Policy session. This is Greg Jackson. Greg, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm Greg Jackson. I'm the executive director for the Community Justice Action Fund. As far as my history in policy and campaign, I've been doing this work for about 13 years now. Pretty old in the game, but started off as a volunteer for the first Obama campaign during the primary, and later became his chair of DC for Obama. After a few joined the re-election campaign as his North Carolina state field director. And then from there, came and joined the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee as their national director. We lost pretty bad, and our candidates were pretty terrible. And so I kind of took a little hiatus from work and then dove into the nonprofit space. And that kind of led me to where I am now. Right now, my organization, we work on reducing gun violence in Black and Brown communities by focusing on community-centered strategies and policy. And I'm excited to do that. I'm a survivor of gun violence, so something very important to me, but a way to merge my policy and campaign experience with my own personal passion. So pleasure to be here.
Okay.
And I'm in a coffee shop, so hopefully y'all can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hopefully the viewers also can hear you. And also, viewers, you have a chat option. So if you wanted to respond to anything or ask the panelists any questions, feel free to put them there, and we'll field them when we're able. So, Greg, I was talking to Laura a little bit about her move between campaigns and organizations, and it sounds like you had a pretty big kind of single move from campaigns into organizational policy work. Could you talk to us a little bit about what that change was like and kind of how you navigated that?
Yeah. Campaign life is kind of brutal. And I think I learned the hard way, even if you win or you lose, you overperform when the campaign's over. So, and I think what's also a little bit tough when you move to DC or Washington and you start working more at the national level, you got to take on candidates that you might not have a personal relationship with or might not frankly believe in. And so I was
I believe we've lost him very briefly.
just dealing with. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Sorry. Yeah, you're back now. Just a little bit of a glitch.
I don't know if y'all can still hear me. Oh, I'm back. Yeah. Ultimately, the challenge of not being able to work for was a big challenge. Most of my career I worked for candidates I was passionate about. And so once you get to a national level, you have to work for multiple candidates. And a lot of times you don't get to choose who you support. And so that kind of was a gut check for the impact and less about the profession, but more about the outcomes. And so that's what ultimately to switch to more issue legislative advocacy, and then also try to create support that could get rid of the people I don't like. So that was a little bit about what drove my transition.
Awesome. So a question for the both of you. I've worked for campaigns for a number of cycles now. And one of the daunting things for me when I think about potentially moving into a policy career is the amount of kind of re-education that I have to go through on issues. No, Laura, you said you had your bout with cancer that kind of introduced you to healthcare issues. Greg, you said you're a survivor of gun violence, so that both of you kind of have a similar past experience with the issues that you're now advocating for and creating policy for. But how did you kind of get over that hurdle of having to suddenly be an expert in what must have at some point been a new field for you? I don't know who wants to go first on that.
I can go first. So I had to, I had a background in the Affordable Care Act in that, I'd worked for the AFL-CIO to help get it passed years and years ago. So I had a base familiarity with it, but
I think we've lost you.
You want me to jump in while Laura recalibrates? Yeah. For me, I had a lived experience that connects to the issue, but I wasn't a policy expert, and it definitely took some time. But I think what's huge is that if you've worked on campaigns, you're not a policy expert, but you are a human expert, and you're a public opinion expert. And frankly, that's way more powerful than someone who went to a university and studied a certain policy. I mean, you can learn the policy side really fast, but as far as how it impacts people and how to get people organized to advocate for it or around it, that's something you can't look up in a book or go to a college, campus for. So I would just offer that probably way more prepared than they think. The other cool thing is most policy organizations, they're going to hire you knowing your skill set. And with most campaigners, we're very front facing, very public individuals. And a lot of policy shops need that. They have research teams, they have interns and fellows and legal counsel that can dig deeper into the weeds of the laws and the legislation, but they don't necessarily have strong communicators that can communicate the policies that they're fighting for. And so more than likely, if they're bringing you onto the team, they're looking for you to be that person, which you're way more equipped than I think you think. And so I wouldn't let the policy angle of it intimidate you too much. I think the other thing I learned is most of the policy experts were academics who had no real life experiences or connection. And so what they wrote and studied in a book, a lot of times didn't land the way it should because they didn't have the people connection. So I think what you have already through your campaign experience, way more equipped, frankly, than them. The only difference is, they have more data and, within a short amount of time, the data and content you need to be more effective.
Okay. Laura, you want to check and make sure that you're with us again fully? Oh, doesn't look like it. Try this. Okay. Well, follow up real quick. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure what the tech issues are there. We're working on it. So kind of in a similar vein, Greg. So from kind of your side and I guess my side and probably a number of people in the viewers' side, talking about the skills we already have. What about those people who are looking to get into policy who are more kind of academic focused? What do you think they can do to get those skill sets that you're talking about, the people skills, the connections to be able to relate and kind of sell the policy, if you will? What do you think that they can do to kind of better their career growth?
I mean, if that's the direction you want to go, I mean, there's a huge move are doing amazing research and thinking of innovative solutions and ideas who never have to get in front of the camera. And so, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that selling the policy is a requirement to advance. But if you do want to go that direction, I hate to say it, but I think you just got to kind of do it. You have to find different ways to kind of work that muscle and exercise that muscle of selling the different or presenting or proposing or pitching the different policies you're fighting for. For me, it started with my family, frankly, like throwing ideas and concepts at them and getting in little debates with my brothers and cousins and uncles and aunts, and kind of fine tuning what positions I can use. And then from there, I took it to my friend circle. We might be at the bar and I'm throwing different concepts and ideas at them and seeing how they react. And then from there, I felt more prepared, and a lot of like policy presentations were on social media. So it might be just a tweet, a couple tweets out and see how people react and see if I can handle a debate, written debate. And then from there, testing it out on Instagram, going live, but just trying to inch my way up until I got to a point where I felt comfortable, briefing Congress. And I guess some events, the most intense one I had to do, I was able to present in front of the United Nations. The U.S. is very strict. I call our government out and how wrong they are, but all of their talking points and their rebuttals I'd already practiced on my family, on my friends, on Twitter, on social media, on coworkers, on just everyone around me. Already knew what was coming at me. There was no surprises, frankly, and I think that's the small steps you take to kind of improve your ability to present and argue your point. I also think for a lot of the issues, especially as progressives, a lot of issues that we're fighting for, there's not a lot of policy or research or understanding. And so you actually may be underestimating the impact of your knowledge and how much you know. And so just get out there and try. It's not like school. You don't study and then take the test. In the real world, you take the test and then you have to learn the lesson afterwards. So just take the freaking test,
Yeah, that's awesome. Laura, if you want to give your mic another shot.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yay. Okay. I had
Perfect.
to completely leave and come back. But anyways, so volunteering, I think what Greg said is really how you can get your foot in the door. And I think you are more likely to get a job with a smaller one issue focused nonprofit than a big nonprofit like say Move On or Center for American Progress that covers many, many issues. So you'll probably be more likely to get hired if you specialize first. But again, it can be hard to get your foot in the door. So you may find it easier to be a policy person for an elected official. But again, they're probably going to assign you a basket of issues. So, like the more you can dig in on one issue, I think the better for your career prospects.
Awesome. Um, and something that we inevitably will touch on today. Do either of you have experience in hiring people looking for careers or at any level, whether it be kind of entry level or further on up?
Yeah, I can jump in first. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in my tenure, um, and at least like 200 people at this point. But on the policy side, um, frankly, there's not enough talent out there from what I've seen. And so what we're looking for is people who are passionate about the issue, that are willing to work hard, don't have an entitled air about them, but are willing to grind and work hard, that are flexible to what the needs are for the set organization, but then really strong hard skills. How strong are you as a writer? How strong are you as a researcher? How strong are you as a communicator? And folks who have those hard skills, passion for the issue, um, frankly, typically can do the best. I mean, we don't need folks with a ton of experience or a ton of bullets in their resume. We kind of just need to see that you have strong skills, you're passionate about the issue in there. A lot of our positions are entry level. We start with typically like a intern or associate, but our model is to try to find folks who are very talented that we can groom to be amazing leaders later. We're not necessarily, especially a nonprofit, we recognize that we can't afford top talent already at the senior level. And so, we accept that and we look for talented folks who are a little underexperienced and invest in developing them, strengthening them to become those senior executives that frankly maybe which is a corporation or a political job. So that's what I mean, I also would say that, my best hires have come from a website. So if you're just hammering away Indeed.com or all these websites, you kind of might be missing the mark. Networking is really, really important. And a lot of times your reference and the people are way more valuable than the websites or any type of fee you pay to be a part of some program. So I really encourage you to kind of get out there and get to know the issues and the organizations you're passionate about and volunteer with them or sign up or follow them on social media and figure out a way to build relationships in the spaces that you want to work and not just depend on your written resume or technology.
Hmm. And I've hired both for my consulting shop and been an advisor to campaigns and orgs and helping in hiring a whole bunch of people. I would say you can start by looking at job listings on Idealist and Gain Power, but echo what Greg said in that it really helps to have friends that'll put in a good word and also let you know about the kinds of jobs that never show up publicly. But if you're just looking to get your start, if this is your first job, you will see those type of entry level jobs show up on Gain Power. That's one place that you can get started. Angelica asked, what's the best way to find these smaller nonprofits to get your start? And you can, if you start volunteering, if you start getting known in your area, in your local area, you'll start to know the staffers at local nonprofits, specifically in whatever issue you care about. You'll get to know the people there, and over time, you may start hearing if they are looking to hire.
I would add one quick thing to that too. A creative way to connect with small nonprofits and the issue that you're concerned about is identify a big nonprofit that's already working on an issue Look at, and it's pretty quick Googles, right? Look at who their funders are. And then typically the funders fund very like-minded organizations. So let's say like you care about criminal justice reform or police reform, and you love to work for Color of Change and didn't get a job with Color of Change. You could Google who supports Color of Change, their donors, and I guarantee there's a foundation, nonprofits that are focused on criminal justice reform, and you'll click partners on their website. You'll see a full list of organizations. The big ones that are out there, but the smaller ones they're investing in, helping to grow. And so that's a creative way to find like-minded nonprofits. Is a lot of foundations come together, they're funded.
Awesome. Take a quick second here to check and see if there are any other questions coming in. Oh, and we have from one of our event organizers in the chat a link to a site that has a bunch of other sites and resources for kind of what we're talking about, getting that first start with smaller groups and other groups. So definitely check that out.
And it looks like Amy asked us to talk about advocacy and organizing on federal versus local campaigns and or community-based organizing versus national. So you can take a look using healthcare as an example. Right now, there are a lot of coalitions that are working together on Build Back Better, because Build Back Better has pieces in it like filling the Medicaid gap, like lowering the cost of prescription drugs, so like increasing home and community-based services. So Build Back Better is a gigantic bill with a whole bunch of different parts, and there are coalitions around each little part. So there are various email lists, there are various calls going on, there's various strategies happening on the federal level. And there are a few key people that are sort of driving those strategies in each field. And so you would get involved with those. You'd be listening in on a lot of conference calls, is what that looks like. But for moving policy in the states, if you're talking state legislature, usually there is maybe one coalition. So I worked on public option in Nevada and Colorado this year. And so there was one coalition in each state, and local groups, local organizers getting together, again, via phone and Zoom because COVID. But it's a lot more plugged in, and you actually can control the strategy and the direction that the legislation takes. On the federal stuff, it's kind of take it or leave it. You're probably not writing the legislation. You are more boostering it or trying to kill it, depending on where you're at and what the legislation is. So the more local you go, the more impact you personally can have on policy.
I think you're spot on with that. I'm leading one of the coalitions that are fighting for Build Back Better right now, around the gun violence side of it. I will say, some of the big differences though with national groups, you have to be more digitally inept. So even if you're an organizer, you're going to be doing primarily digital organizing. A lot of the advocacy work is more congressional, White House Hill focused work. They're going to look for organizations. Organizations are going to experience in the White House level, experience advocating at that level. And then I think the federal level going to have a much bigger emphasis on just national press and shaping and pushing the message through the CNNs and Washington Post and New York Times of the world. Local organizing is very different. I mean, it's more hands-on. It's getting to different members, getting in their legislature, getting in their face, going to the mayor's office, and probably comparable to what you've experienced at a campaign. You can get a lot more done, a lot faster, but there are less opportunities. One team, in the entire state, our coalition in Texas is like 8 people. And Texas is a huge state and a huge effort to take on. But so you'll be a part of a small team, but you'll have a much bigger impact. But frankly, you might get, you might be less appreciated. But that local organizing and advocacy work at the state level, you can kind of run up the score on your accomplishments, and that can put you in position for national advocacy work, especially if you don't have access to the Hill or you've never worked in that congressional Hill space. And I've seen some really amazing folks who just crushed it at the state level and moved over to national and crush it the same way, right? And outperform folks who already had Hill and congressional experience. So it's definitely a different route to get to the national progressive space. I also think if you are someone who has future aspirations of running for office or staying engaged locally, then state and local is the way to go. A lot of the national stuff will help you build your profile and maybe build your social media following, and get you in some pretty conferences and press stories, but you're not going to be able to build a relationship with the community. And the local and state work will allow you to build that on top of the local advocacy. So it might not be as shiny, but it allows you to build a real foundation for future work if you're committed to a certain state or community. So I wouldn't get distracted by the federal stuff or national stuff if that's not the route you're trying to go.
Awesome. So we just got a question in from Cass, who's asking, since COVID, what's the vibe on being able to stay local and work federally or nationally/regionally across states? Are we still dealing with the DC Eastern Standard Time centric mindset, or is that chilling out a bit since the before times?
Well, I've noticed a lot more people that I know that have decamped from DC, that they maybe went home or somewhere else or somewhere where they could have a lot more square footage for their dollar. I still see a lot of jobs that say remote for now and DC next year. So be prepared for that. If you're looking at a job that's remote now, it might not stay that way. But I do at the moment, it being 2021 and state legislatures are done, my focus is on national work and I do it from Denver. So you certainly can do it from anywhere, but it helps if you've already built your reputation and your relationships before you leave DC.
Yeah, and that's a little bit what you were talking about earlier with the kind of networking strategy, right? Where you built those networks and those relationships in a certain place in a certain area. Do you think that has a lot to do with what you were just talking about?
I think so. And once you have made a name for yourself, you don't necessarily have to stay in Washington D.C., but probably most people at least do a stint there at some point.
Yeah, I want to echo too. I mean, a lot of people are able to do federal and national work without being here, but it is changing fast. I mean, even this holiday season, there's all types of networking events and holiday parties that are starting to come back up. They lifted the mask mandate in the city here. So if you're not there, I don't think it's a required thing to be in DC, but it's definitely a competitive advantage to be in here if you're on a national push and you're focused on federal work. Because I think folks underestimate the power of building relationships after 5 p.m. And that's frankly what's going to help you grow, and become and outperform some of your competitors out there. I also think even if you're working for a national organization that is doing state work in different states, COVID has allowed us to be really effective and really impactful managing across the country. But that's starting to drift too. And I think what you have to be mentally prepared for is a lot of travel. And you might not be getting paid the most money, but you may be getting asked to travel, 2 or 3 times a month and get reimbursed for your food and reimbursed for your rental car. And so, the toll that comes with it when you are trying to be national or try to manage from afar, and you prefer to be in, I don't know, you want to live in Florida, but most of your team is in the Northeast, and you got to have a mentality that you're going to go to Northeast a lot and be ready for that. And I think that time is coming pretty fast. So I don't know. I think if you live outside of the district, this is a good time to jump in and join a national organization, but just be mentally prepared to transition either into the Washington area or into a very mobile work lifestyle, which I actually enjoy. I like that part, but you have to be ready for it.
Well, you're coming to us from a coffee shop somewhere, right?
Yeah, I've been to Vegas, Miami, and DC. A little road walk. You get to see things. I don't know, actually, before you have big family and kids and all that. So yeah, I would encourage you to do it while you're young. But it's definitely not for everybody.
Yeah, I love it. Put me on a bus tour, 20 days, 20 states. I love it.
That kind of brings me into our next question, which is kind of simple, but it's a good thing to talk about. What is your favorite thing about what you do, and what is your least favorite thing about what you do?
Well, the favorite thing is being able to achieve concrete things that help people. And I have gone on the road a lot. I've done a lot of bus tours and so on, where I have met people all over the country dealing with health crises, and knowing that we're able to get things done that help people or to stop bad things that would affect people. So that's probably the best thing is, and if you work in the States, you will have a lot more concrete things to look at than if you work federally. But, this past year, we have accomplished some federal stuff. Stuff has gotten done. Uh, so that's probably the best. The worst is when you are just trying to hold back the tide and the tide flows over you anyway. Because, if you structurally in 2017, 2018, there was not a lot we could do to stop bad stuff. When the presidency, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court is all controlled by people who I strongly disagree with on every level, you can stop some of the damage, but you can't stop it all.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think what's been so exciting, especially if you find yourself in a lane that hasn't been driven a lot, it's phenomenal how much impact you can have as one person. Especially if you come with that campaign fervor or pace. Oh my gosh, you're like the world ablaze, and run laps around the policy folks, which is awesome. And so I've loved that so much. I've loved the ability to make such a big impact in a short time and with a very small team. Or when it rains, it pours. When you're losing, and before. I mean, this year I've gotten probably 70 been fighting for 8 years was accomplished in this year alone, right? But I also went 7.5 years of like and nothing and just doing webinar thing, lobbying. Everything started happening to a point where we're going to think like, oh, what else do we need to get done? Um, so that's what's kind of tough about it. Things move really fast and then they get locked up and like this kind of stop and go type of environment. But I do really appreciate it because when you're doing campaigns, you elect someone you believe, but you don't know if they can actually get the job done. I mean, they're going to give their best effort, but you have an amazing candidate that goes to Congress and stalls out and gets nothing done for 10 years. And I think a lot of times we overlook that. And when you really believe in how the world should be different, it's exciting to be able to kind of move the needle on the policy issue and the actual change, as opposed to entrusting someone else with it and fighting for someone else. And so, for me, it's been amazing, but it's also been like a transition from me believing in other people and fighting for other people that hopefully will fight for me, to being like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it myself. Sorry to curse, but I'm gonna just do it myself, or I'm gonna do it with my team, or we're gonna get it done, and I actually like that transition quite a bit. But it is feast or famine a lot. And I also will say you don't always get the glory. There's no election day. The bill signing is a cool thing and you get a couple cameras there, but there's no big, party and celebration. And so a lot of your victories are kind of, they're just not as high profile. So you kind of have to learn to be happy with changing the world behind the curtain. You have to be more of a Hawkeye than an Iron Man, for all my Avengers fans out there.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Greg said in feast or famine. 2021 has been feast for progressives, but there was a whole lot of years of famine before. And so if you are the kind of person that needs immediate gratification, campaign world is probably better because you're going to win or lose in November, and that's that. But policy, you could be working for a decade, you could be working for several decades, and you could barely see it move. And then all of a sudden, something unlocks and then you get everything.
Oh, and then what's crazy, Laura, I'll never forget, I met this, I was on the picture of Congressman Brad Miller, and his life career on regulations around the credit card industry and their predatory moves on youth and in college and everything. And he had passed all these different measures. Boom, 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 boom. And in 2010, lost, and that new man out all his property, like within the first 100 days. And he told me about it, and that we were like at a phone bank or something. And I was just like, man, And so it's important to acknowledge that just as fast as things unravel, but focus on like, hey, like we got to fight to change the world for the better. Like you can't just give up on the world, and you just have to ask yourself, like, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Like sometimes you got to just put it on your back and just be prepared to take the losses and the wins. But as campaign folks, you're probably a little tougher than you think for that type of work. It's probably more what Laura said, like, can you play the long game versus the short, July to November game.
Awesome. So we've had a couple more requests to go a little bit more in detail on kind of background education skills. We touched on that a little bit earlier, but reiterate or go a little bit deeper. What are kind of education or skill requirements that you think are important to work in policy?
Well, there are plenty of people with degrees, but I think an interest in an issue will maybe get you further than book knowledge. And what's most important of all is knowing the people to ask. That there are very few policy people that are deep, deep experts, and you don't have to be one, especially if you're getting started. What you need to know is who to ask to get the answers you need. That's a far more useful skill. That's just not something that you're not going to have 20 years of expertise when you get started. But if you know the person that does, that will pick up your call, that's the most useful skill in the world.
Totally agree. I mean, when I started in this space, the first couple of webinars, people have been doing this work for 30 years. I'm 36. I thought I was old, and these people have been doing this since I was 6 years old. And there's no book in the world I could read to catch up with them. But what I could do is build a relationship with them. And then I can leverage their research and leverage their policy and leverage their feedback and input. And that's what I had to do for myself to learn and grow. But even our policy and research director now, that's the number one thing I challenge her with. Like, who's your kid researchers? How are you finding the best and the brightest that support you in your advocacy work or support you in your policy development? Because a lot of folks that are deep in the academic space, they're more worried about publishing and being correct and digging deeper into the issue. They're less worried about the implementation and the change around these issues. And so in our nonprofit and advocacy space, our charge is to bring about change, not necessarily to research. So leverage that, because a lot of them want their work to be seen. They want to see their article, mentioned in the CNN article. They want to see their new book that they wrote, in your hand when you go into a member of the Congress office. And so if you can build those relationships, you can leverage all of their genius. They'll applaud you for it, and you can applaud them for it, and you can become kind of this partnership that can work together to bring about change. And that's how you do it. I mean, they want to shine and you want to change. And so just bring those worlds together. And that's where coming from campaign equips you pretty well. You already know how to organize people, how to bring folks together around a common goal. The difference is now you're dealing with Dr. So-and-so and Professor so-and-so who's been this for 40 years and is a person. It's just a different group of folks who in their minds are way more intelligent than you, and hell, they might be. But Your goal is not to outsmart them. Your goal is to leverage their genius to help you reach your goal. And so that's what I look for. I mean, it's more about how you pull together the content, how you pull together the people, how you pull together the knowledge. And if you're stepping into a space where there isn't a lot of policy research or solutions that exist, then yes, we need that foundation from you, but we still need that tenacity to go out and find bright minds to start to experiment and create these new research and create these new report documents to help build a foundation for that. And kind of where I am now, my team is, we're venturing into territory that's never been studied, ever, and so I'm not asking them to know something that no one else knows. I'm asking them to be brave enough to venture out there and find the smart people to help them.
Awesome. All right. I just wanted to remind everyone, if you got questions, please put them in. We're kind of winding down towards the end of our session here, so if you have something to ask, now's a great time. Is there anything that the two of you wanted to touch on before we take some questions?
I think like a lot of politics, a lot depends on who you know. And so even if you are a natural introvert, keep people's business cards, friend them on social media, keep a really big email Rolodex, because you never know when you're going to need to know the person that you met a couple years ago because their expertise or their work, or they work for an org you want to work for. You just never know. So, even if you're not extroverted, you don't necessarily have to do the DC bar scene or whatever the bar scene is in the city you are, but the people you meet, grab a hold of them and make sure you know what their expertise is and how you can get a hold of them later.
Mm-hmm. Definitely echo that. And don't be afraid to like push your way in, especially if you don't have the most obvious resume or the obvious background. The organization I'm executive director for now, the position I was hired for didn't exist. I had to convince our executive director at the time that she needed me. And then I had to convince her to create a role for me. And I had to convince her to pay me. Right. And that was 3 levels. I was volunteering at first. I was like, hey, you need to dig deeper into this. I'm a candidate. I know how we can move the ball. Training on too much research and too much press, but you're not doing any policy. And she was like, well, we would love to. We don't have the budget for it. And I said, well, okay, well, let me just show you what I can do. And I just started like pushing things, doing things. And she was like, oh, that makes sense. And I was like, well, can you just pay us a little bit, please? You got to have something. And she was like, okay, well, we'll contract you. And I actually had another full-time job at the time. So I was doing some double duty. But I was like, okay, she gave me a little cut. And it was like a little small contracting role. And I just crushed it. And then I came back and I said, look, I'm crushing it. Like, this is important. And you may not have it in your budget, but if we do this well, then this will create a whole new stream of funding for you. This is what you'll go back to your donors and brag about. Not the research project, not the training. You'll brag about this bill that's moving through Congress, right? Or you'll brag about this executive action from the White House. And I had to sell that dream. And she was like, okay, I'll do it. And she cut some corners. She actually reduced her own salary and hired me. And I said, thank God, and then when I was in there, I just sprinted like hell. And, and we accomplished a lot. And right now our budget is nearly doubled. And the main thing that people look at our budget for, or our funders, what they look at when they attribute to giving us more, is our advocacy work and the way that we're not only researching and training, but we're actually moving legislation. So I was able to dream it, to chase her down, to sell it, to sacrifice, and then eventually kind of build a path for myself. And especially when you're dealing with smaller nonprofits or more emerging issues or conflicts, you're going to have to do that. Like sometimes you got to kind of fight your way into the organization or fight your way into the movement. And it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be clean. It might not be on a website. It might be at a meeting or a conference. You might have to kind of really sell your dream to whoever you want to hire you and do that. And I think as campaign folks, and especially as organizers, we're used to fighting our way in. But I think the policy world can be a little intimidating if you're thinking about these big think tanks and lobbying firms. But that's just don't stress that. Like, find where you want to be and fight your way in. You can do it. I mean, it's not it's not going to be simple, but it is a transition from where you are now, and there's no clean path to jump from one side to the other. It's going to take some creativity. It's going to take relationships. It's going to take you bulldozing your way, or it's going to take some creative way for you to stand out. I will say that this era is very, this is a unique time where you have everything's digital. So you don't have to think about physically going to bars or physically meeting this person or going to this conference. Right now, all of it's on Zoom. So you could be all over the country from your living room. And so take advantage of that and just jump into spaces, jump into rooms, join webinars, jump on Instagram lives, just jump all over the place digitally to get in the face of the people you need to, because I think that luxury is going to pass. And then, you might have a much harder time breaking into Washington or breaking into Denver, or into a network that you're trying to join.
Mm-hmm. And what he said is absolutely right, in that keep working it, keep doing what you're doing, and show how good you are at it. I approached Healthcare Voter at the beginning of 2018 and wanted to get involved, and then they asked me to be a co-chair, and so I was a co-chair for a couple of years, and then this summer they asked me to be executive director, and that's just because I was killing it. So keep doing what you're doing. Work your way in if you have to start as a volunteer, and they will eventually, hopefully, come around.
Oh, and can I add one more thing on Laura's point? Especially for these younger nonprofits, they don't know what the hell they're doing yet. They still trying to figure it out too. So like, don't get too intimidated. Laura and I are perfect examples. People who were very passionate, who cared, who performed well. And then they were like, okay, you the executive director now, go do it. And we're like, what? What? I don't, what you talking about? There's no book for this. So, a lot of in these nonprofits are just like us, where we were in your seat at one point. We were very passionate. We learned how to make shit happen. And now they want us to raise money and build a team. Just don't be too intimidated, because a lot of us are learning as we go, especially in the younger nonprofit space.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to be wrapping up. One last question. Greg and Laura, what's the best way to connect with you? I think I see some Twitter handles under your names there.
Yes, you can see our Twitter handles. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Yep, I think that's about right. My emails are a madhouse, so you can email me, but it might be a while to get to me. But if you follow me on Twitter, in my link tree, actually on my Twitter, you can actually schedule like a one-on-one. So if you want to do like an intro call, something, we can do that. I'm pretty easy to find on social media. And we're hiring too. So if you have any interest or violence prevention or social justice, especially in Black and Brown communities, we would love to talk to you, because we're hiring a research intern, we're hiring an organizing director, and we're looking to hire a legislative affairs associate, which is more of an entry-level legislative policy position. So a lot of opportunity on my end, and I know some other orgs are looking too.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. And thank you for everybody watching. This has been recorded and will get put up onto the website for the conference, so you should be able to access it and look back at it whenever you care to do so. So thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Great work, Laura.
Great work, Greg.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Bye-bye.